Today we're going to be breaking down the top 10 staples from this new set, March of the Machines. I'm also going to go ahead and be recording all of the other top 10s, top 5s after this. So make sure you stick around, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so you get alerted when each one of these drop. Let's start off with the staples. Now, like I said, this is the new commons and uncommons that are that could be used in modern pioneer formats like that, where it's competitive and it's not necessarily standard. So that's why you might not see some cards like Stoke the Flames, just because it's already legal in pioneer and modern. It's not new for us. So I'm going to be breaking down the 10 cards that I think could see to be played in pioneer and modern. So pick them up, and there's some honorable mentions. So we'll start off with that, and let's get into the list. So honorable mentions, we have 4 cards that I think could be interesting. You might want to try them out at some point. When you are thinking, keep these in mind when you're brewing new decks. So a lot of these are very niche. They're probably going to be using 1 or 2 different style of decks, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be aware that they exist. Storm the Sea Core I am going to be using in the first week of the new season, and I think it's actually a really sweet Magic card. So we're gonna be playing Heart and Scales. So if you're a huge fan of Heart and Scales, definitely subscribe for that one, because yeah. So I think this card is actually quite good because it's 4 mana. Basically 4 creatures each get 2 counters. If you have Heart and Scales, it scales up depending on how many you have. So it's actually quite good, and it gives your creatures vigilance and trample, so that way you could do if they're at 20, you could maybe get them down to 5. Still have blockers up because they all have vigilance. So you actually get to maybe win the next turn. It's a great way of closing the game out. What's one of the problems Heart and Scales has currently in Pioneer. And I think this might address that concern, maybe with a couple copies only. I wouldn't go up to 4. 2 seems like the right number. Now, Meeting of the Minds. This is a play on a commonly made card by Wizards. This time we got Convoke. So this is only, I think, in 1 style deck, and that is Young Pyromancer and the Is It one. So if you can make a bunch of tokens, so basically you could tap your tokens at instant speed, draw 2 cards. This might actually be better than the 3-drop they're playing now because it's sorcery speed. So being able to hold up counter magic and drawing cards at the end of the turn seemed like a great way to go about it. So keep an eye for this deck next season. I'm going to be putting that on the poll at some point. Also, Moment of Truth. Anticipate. Look at 3 cards, put 1 in hand, put 1 in the yard, and put 1 on the bottom. Actually quite good if you're in a combo style strategy, right? So this might actually see play in Neoform or something like that, where you're trying to dig for Neoform. One of the cards you want to pitch, but you want to put like a Troxa to the bottom, right? Because you're trying to Neoform into it, so it saves certain components, or even like Possibility Storm, where you're trying to put the Enter the Infinite and Borgamos in your deck. So it actually works out quite well and stuff like that, where you're trying to put a combo piece to the bottom, mill a card for advantage, and take a card. Halo Forger is kind of a weak Snapcaster. Keep in mind that it can hit instant sorceries in both yards. So that is quite relevant, but it's mainly going to be a 3 mana, 4 mana, play it, Fatal Push something, and it's sorcery speed, which is reasonable overall, but is it better than the other things we have access to? I'm going to say no. It is a 3/1 body, which is relatively decent. Noticing that now, I should have put Forger in the middle so you can see his power and toughness, but I do think the card is actually quite good. It's niche and it's a fairy, so hopefully that means we're getting more fairies in Eldraine. We better, because we need new fairies to make fairies a thing in modern. I don't think this makes the cut because fairies typically like to be playing at flash instant speed, so that way they can tempo out the opponent, but this can't accomplish that necessarily. I guess it technically can tempo the opponent out at sorcery speed. Let's get into the actual top 10 list. Let's break it down. Number 10 is a speculative pick. We do know that this effect has been seeing a lot of play. I will be trying this, I think, in like a Mardu Reanimator shell. So basically, ETBs, you discard a card, draw 2 cards. Typical way of red draw. If you manage to do 4 damage to it, it flips over to a 3 mana 3 or a 3/3 that you could pay 3 and discard a card and create 2 1/1s, and they gain haste. So that actually works quite well with Evoke. That's the idea, and that's what blue and red is supposed to be in the set. So you could tap it, discard a card, get 2 tokens that are blue and red, so you could pay for the blue or the red part of a cost of a Evoke card. I'm not sure exactly how good this card is going to be. You're not going to want to be in a deck that where both of these sides are actually matter more so than like the one that you just pay 1, sack it, give your creatures haste, which is also relatively good. Keep in mind, got to balance that component out when deciding which one of these effects you want. But I think this should be in the consideration depending on what your deck is. So let's get into number 9 on our list. Number 9 is Seed of Hope. Now, mill 2 cards. You may put a permanent among them. Milled this way into your hand, you gain 2 life for 1 green and instant speed. I'm going to be trying this out this season in Greasefang. I don't know if it's going to be relatively great in Greasefang, but I think that's the best Pioneer deck in existence right now. Competitive-wise, that actually could maybe adopt this card. So I'm going to try 3 copies of it. So I could look at the top 2, put a Greasefang in hand or a land, and put the other card in the yard. I could also, I guess, fail to find. So you could mill 2 vehicles into the yard, 2 Parhelions, whatever. So, and you gain 2 life, which could be relevant, but most of the time you're winning relatively fast. So I don't think the life is going to matter in Greasefang in particular, but it could be also, this also could see some play in Pauper. I don't know. I haven't played Pauper in a minute, but Modern, there also could be a go mill yourself strategy that also could work, like Vengevine maybe. Keep in mind, this is a sweet common, maybe to consider picking up for your collection. Number 8 on our list is Invasion of Ergomon. 1 red, 1 green. Comes down ETBs, create a treasure token. You may discard a card and draw a card. This is probably more playable than the previous number 10 card, even though you do draw 1 less card. But there's probably more times often that you care about the ramp aspect of this. So you can maybe get to a 4 drop next turn, which is actually quite nice, while also filtering out some scrap from your hands. Make sure you hit your land drops. So this is actually quite nice. And 5 mana, bring 5 damage. I don't know how good these battles are going to be when it comes to actually flipping them. But, you know, if you do manage to deal 5 to it, flip it over. Basically, when the Rhino comes into play, you may discard a card. If you do, you search your library for a land or a battle and put it into your hand. 3/4 Trampler for 2 mana is reasonably statted, so it's definitely worth consideration. And I do like the fact that the Rhino is in both artwork. It's kind of cool. I think this card is reasonable. If you're interested in the treasure aspect, and maybe you want this over something like Prosperous Innkeeper in Pioneer, this could be a way to go about it. Let's get into number 7 on our list. Number 7 on our list is Invasion of Zendikar. This card comes down, you get to basically search for 2 basic land cards, put them into play tapped, and if you could deal 3 damage to it, it flips over to a 4/4 Vigilance Haste that is also a land. It taps for any color. So one thing to notice about this is I'm going to be trying right out of the gate as well. This time it's going to be in Dreadshift. I'm going to be trying it with Abzan with Elishnorn. So if I play Elishnorn before this, I get 4 basic swamps, put it into play, and deal 8 damage with the Dread. Nope, 16 damage with the Dread Presence, right? Because Elishnorn doubles the Dread Presence triggered abilities. So it actually works quite well. I think this could be a decent card in that deck. Maybe make it a, not necessarily a legit strategy, but strong enough to be able to where you could take it to an F&M. This is actually a really good card. It might be in the consideration as the best of this type of effect. It's either this or Migration Path where you could cycle it. Either way, both cards look very good. Definitely, if you're a ramp player like me, consider picking this up for your collection. Number 6 on our list is Marshal of Zalfur. What I like about this card is it has an upside, right? Most of the time, You don't actively want to be attacking with your lords. You don't want to put them in harm's way, so you leave them back. This at least taps down the big chunky dude on your opponent's side of the board, unless your knights attack, which I think is actually quite relevant, right? So I really like that this could accomplish that component. It's still a 2-mana lord, so it's strictly better than the Ixalan lords, right? Because they were just vanilla lords. So this gives you the ability to have that extra upside. So unless there is a clear board on the opponent's side, maybe you will risk the attack, but it always makes more sense to just hold him back, make it where he can't die in combat, and just tap down the biggest thing on the opponent's board, so that way you get in more damage. So I like this knight. The question more is in Pioneer, is blue-white knights actually going to be good? I don't know. We're going to be trying it out though. So yeah, I think this card is pretty reasonable. It's just to be deterministic if this color combination with knights could ever be a competitive thing, is the thing that could hold it back. So let's get into number 5 on our list. Number 5 is Omen Hawker. This is a 1-mana blue tap, produce colorless and a blue for activated abilities. I really like this card. I have a in the works a deck built with this in it. It really just try to maximizes what you can do with the activated ability component of this card. We know that the Llanowar Elves and Elvish Mystic are quite, huge for Pioneer when it comes to mana dorks on turn 1. This is technically still a mana dork, right? You could play this, Bank Buster turn 2, tap this, draw a card. It works quite well with that. So it does allow you to activate abilities one turn ahead, potentially, because most of the time you have to wait a turn after you play it if it costs mana, right? I'm thinking this card is going to be quite cool. Expect to see it in a combo shell, because it does have a infinite combo in it to hopefully win the game right on the spot. So I'm super excited about trying this out. If you guys have any recommendations with this card that you want to try it out with, let me know down in the comments. Let's get to number 4 on my list. Kehenra Spell Spear. This card is kind of cool. 2-mana, 2/2 prowess trample. Reasonable stats. I wish I would have haste instead of trample sometimes, but it's still fine overall. And you get to pay 3 and a blue or 3 and 2 life. It becomes a 3/3 trample ward 2 prowess. So that is quite effective of a body. So I think this card is actually quite good. It's only an extra bonus upside that it's a jackal. It's a jackal. So outside of that, it's also, of course, a warrior, which I don't think you would ever play this in Warrior Hammer Time. But, that creature type is becoming more relevant in Pioneer. But I think this has a fine body. And the trample does make prowess better. Just depends. It's really going to depend on how much better does it make it for that one extra cost, being a 2-drop instead of a 1-drop. All right, so let's get into number 3 on our list. Number 3 on our list is a duo. Now, both of these cards are kind of the best removal in the uncommon and common slots. There wasn't really one in white or blue or green. These two I think I'm actually quite interested in for Pioneer. Collective Nightmare potentially could be a tap 3 creatures. Target creature gets -3/-3. So if you're in a token-based strategy, or like in my case, I'm going to be playing Junggrass Surprise, which basically is filled with creatures like Prosperous Innkeeper. It has, all of the treasure token makers like Magda, and we don't actively really want to be attacking with them. So the fact that this is Convoke actually helps with that, and since most of our creatures are small, we have no problem tapping them and killing something. So this actually is a quite good removal spell for that deck, since, like I said, most of our creatures aren't big enough to want to be able to attacking in the first place until we get the grass down to actually deal 5 damage apiece. The other card is Volcanic Spite. This typically, if you're in Teamer Creativity, Possibility Storm with Fire Prophecy. If you're using Fire Prophecy, you should just swap it out for this card. Basically, it's really used for combo decks. This one has the ability to hit planeswalkers in battles too. So it's a huge, just a upshift in power of the card, because the Fire Prophecy could only hit creatures, so you can never hit a planeswalker, which is this, a decently relative permanent type that you might want to hit. So definitely, if you're in a combo deck, red, where you're putting stuff to the bottom of your deck, keep drawing to your combo, definitely consider putting this in your deck. It's a good removal. So yeah, that's kind of a boring number 3, but we have to get them out of the way. They're both really good removal spells. So let's get to number 2 on our list. We have Tentacle Brawler on number 2 on our list. This is one of the cards I think I'm really excited about for Hardened Scales. And comes down, potentially if you have Hardened Scales on turn 1. This comes down as a 3/3 right out of the gate. Then every time you put another +1/+1 counter on another permanent you control, you put another counter on this, which basically doubles it to 2. So this thing gets pretty gigantic very fast. 2-drop means it can start attacking on turn 3, which hopefully by then it'd be a 5/5, 6/6 to get through a Cavalier of Thorns. So overall, I think this actually applies a lot of pressure. I don't think the warrior or the elemental type will matter, but both of those types are starting to matter in Pioneer. But I think this card is actually quite good. And if you are considering Selesnya Hardened Scales in Pioneer, this is probably a good card for you to pick up. Like I said, it scales super fast. It has trample, so it can get over the attacks and just smash your opponent's face in quickly. Yeah, so let's get into the number 1 uncommon from March of the Machines. We have a whole new hate cycle in the new set, but Surge of Salvation is honestly the only Pioneer modern playable one of these. The blue one's a counter spell for red and black, or red and green, so you just rather play Ether Gust. The green one basically is a 3/2 that has flash, and you could dig for a creature, I think, I put in your hand. It's kind of okay. We have a sorcery speed Rending Volley, which is really bad when Greasefang is must answer threat right out of the bat, so that's not really playable. And then the black one's okay, but for the most part it hits on green, which most of their creatures have bigger butts than 3, so it's kind of invalidates that one. White, it can be hit most of the things, but it's still not very good. The white one, oh my gosh, this card is super, super awesome. I think this is the only one that honestly I can guarantee could show up in Modern. 1 mana, you and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn. Prevent all damage that black or red sources would deal to creatures you control this turn. So what's really awesome about this, for one, stops Valakut triggers on the stack if Amulet is targeting you with, of course, Valakut. The other interesting part of this, it protects your stuff against Rakdos Midrange, which is a huge deck in Pioneer. And in a combat blowout potential, they're blocking your creatures. Even if you're in black and red, right? You're Mardu, you can still deal damage to your opponent's creature, which I think is absolutely absurd. So this card is quite awesome for both aspects of it. The potential of blowing out a removal spell, protecting your threats against Rakdos midrange, Valakut, or any kind of target burn damage like that, and against mono red or mono black or whatever, your opponent's not dealing damage to your creatures is quite powerful as a combat trick. So I really like this card. It's 1 mana, it's efficient. So this is the one I think they did right. I wish they would have redid the green one a little bit better, because can't be countered should be a thing. We just need a better Veil Summer. I shouldn't say better. I should say a healthier Veil Summer. But yeah, maybe if instead of draw it was Surveil one, seems fine. But I like this card for Pioneer and Modern. Definitely pick this up and put it in your collection. Even if you're not in white right now, if you ever do pick up the color white, this is probably a huge consideration for your sideboard against Thoughtseize, against Scam in Modern, against Rakdos mid-range, and Pioneer. There's just so many top tier decks that are black and red in the formats that this is going to be a great card for years to come. So, like I said, subscribe, hit that bell notification, and let me know down in the comments if you think I missed a card, uncommon or common, that should have made this list. And make sure you stick around, because tomorrow should drop the top 5 jank cards, which are basically just 5 cards that I think are sweet. So they're my favorite kind of cards of the set. This set, there is a top 20. So that's going to be coming in a few days, because after tomorrow, it'd be the sleepers. Then we get into the top 20. I gotta get going, and let's get on. I gotta record the next video, so talk to you soon.